If you are a sensitive person, you probably feel overwhelmed more often than others. Crowded places drain you. Other people's emotions stick to you. You overthink conversations, feel exhausted after social contact, and wonder why life feels heavier for you than it seems to be for everyone else. And at some point, you start asking yourself a dangerous question. What is wrong with me? But what if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if sensitivity is not a flaw, but an unstructured psychological capacity? Carl Jung believed that sensitivity, when misunderstood, becomes suffering, but when integrated, it becomes strength. In this video, I want to show you why sensitive people feel overwhelmed and why it has nothing to do with weakness. Most sensitive people were taught the same story long before they ever had the language to question it, and this story quietly shaped the way they learned to relate not only to others, but to themselves. From an early age, you were told, directly or indirectly, that you were too emotional, that your reactions were excessive, that your inner responses were out of proportion to the world around you, and that your nervous system seemed incapable of maintaining the kind of emotional neutrality that society quietly rewards. You were labeled too reactive, too fragile, too easily affected by the moods, tensions, and expectations of others. And over time, these labels did something subtle but profound. They taught you to experience your own sensitivity not as an instrument of perception, but as a defect in need of correction. So you learned to see your nervous system as a problem, something to suppress, something to numb, something to control or fix, rather than as a finely tuned sensory organ designed to register what others overlook. But Carl Jung saw sensitivity very differently. In his clinical work, Jung observed that highly sensitive individuals tend to possess what he described as thin psychological boundaries, a phrase that has often been misunderstood as a sign of weakness, when in reality it points to something far more complex and far more valuable. These boundaries are not thin because the individual lacks strength, but because they remain open. An open psyche perceives more. It registers subtle emotional undercurrents. It notices shifts in tone, atmosphere, and unspoken tension long before these signals rise to conscious awareness in others. The sensitive individual does not merely react to the world, they receive it, often in its raw, unfiltered form. The problem, Jung argued, is that not that such individuals feel too much. The real problem is that they were almost never taught how to contain what they feel, how to metabolize emotional intensity without being flooded by it, and how to differentiate between what belongs to them and what has merely passed through their awareness. Without containment, sensitivity becomes overwhelming. Without structure, openness turns into exposure. And without guidance, the very capacity that could one day become authority is experienced first as vulnerability. This is the misunderstanding at the root of the empath's early suffering, not an excess of feeling, but an absence of inner form. At a certain point, sensitivity does not merely remain misunderstood, it becomes recruited into a role. And this role is one of the most psychologically seductive archetypes in the human psyche, the healer. When a sensitive person grows up in an environment where emotional attunement is necessary for survival, they often discover, unconsciously, that their value lies in their ability to stabilize others, to anticipate emotional storms before they erupt, and to absorb tension so that harmony can be preserved. This is where sensitivity quietly transforms into function. You learn that you are needed when you listen. You are valued when you soothe. You are accepted when you carry what others cannot or will not face within themselves. Over time, this adaptive strategy hardens into identity. Jung would describe this as an archetypal possession, a state in which the ego becomes identified with a role that originally served a protective purpose, but eventually begins to consume the individual's psychic energy from the inside. The healer archetype is noble, But it is also dangerous, because the healer, when unconscious, learns to locate meaning through sacrifice, self-erasure, and emotional labor that is rarely reciprocated, and slowly begins to confuse endurance with virtue and exhaustion with moral worth. Instead of developing inner authority, the sensitive individual develops hyper-responsibility. They begin to feel accountable for the emotional equilibrium of rooms they did not disturb, relationships they did not damage, and wounds they did not create. And yet, because this role is socially rewarded, it rarely feels like a problem, at least not at first. Jung warned that when empathy is not balanced by structure, it mutates into martyrdom. The empath becomes a container for unresolved emotions, projections, and shadow material belonging to others, while simultaneously losing contact with their own center, their own limits, and their own will. What begins as compassion slowly turns into depletion. And here lies the crucial insight. The healer role does not arise from abundance, but from a lack of inner boundary. It is not chosen freely. It is adopted as a survival mechanism. Until the empath realizes that healing others at the cost of self-coherence is not altruism, but a subtle form of self-abandonment, this pattern will repeat endlessly, dressed each time in new faces, new relationships, and new justifications. This is the moment Jung would say the psyche prepares for confrontation, because no archetype can be dissolved without resistance. And the resistance, in this case, comes from a deeply ingrained fear. If I stop carrying others, who am I allowed to become? When the empath begins to loosen their identification with the healer, the psyche does not reward this shift with immediate relief or clarity. Instead, it opens the door to one of the most unsettling encounters in inner development, the confrontation with power. For years, power was something you associated with threat, intrusion, domination, or emotional violence, because your sensitivity made you acutely aware of how easily force can distort relationships and silence vulnerability. So you learned to define yourself in opposition to power. You became the one who yields, the one who listens, the one who adapts. But Jung was clear that whatever is rejected by the conscious ego does not disappear. It descends into the shadow, where it grows distorted, autonomous, and increasingly influential. As soon as the empath withdraws from constant self-sacrifice, images begin to surface from the unconscious, impulses toward control, firmness, assertiveness, even domination. And these images are often accompanied by guilt, fear, and moral anxiety. You may begin to notice a discomfort with your own boundaries, as though saying no carries the same psychic charge as aggression, or as though standing your ground risks turning you into the very figure you once feared. This is the shadow of power, not cruelty itself, but the unintegrated potential for strength that was never allowed conscious expression. Jung warned that empathy without access to power becomes sentimentality, a state in which feeling replaces action and moral concern substitutes for personal agency. At the same time, power without empathy collapses into tyranny. The task of individuation, therefore, is not to destroy the shadow, but to make it conscious. The empath must come to recognize that the capacity to influence, to direct, and to command is not inherently corrupt. It becomes destructive only when it is denied, split off, and projected outward. This stage often brings intense inner conflict. You may feel moments of inner hardness, decisiveness, or emotional detachment, followed by a surge of self-judgment that insists you are becoming cold, selfish, or dangerous. But Jung insisted that these reactions are signs of growth, not regression. They indicate that the psyche is attempting to reorganize itself around a new center, one in which sensitivity and strength no longer cancel each other out. Until the empath learns to hold power consciously, it will continue to appear unconsciously, in resentment, in passive resistance, or in sudden emotional withdrawal. Integration does not mean becoming dominant, it means becoming capable. And capability, when united with awareness, is the foundation of true authority. When power is no longer rejected, feared, or unconsciously projected onto others, a subtle but decisive shift begins to take place within the psyche. A reorganization that Jung described not as domination, but as inner authority. This authority does not announce itself loudly, nor does it arrive through external validation, confidence rituals, or forceful self-assertion. Instead, it emerges quietly as a felt sense of internal coherence, where thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to align around a single center. For the empath, this moment is often confusing at first. You may notice that situations which once overwhelmed you now register differently, not because you feel less, but because feeling no longer fragments your sense of self. Your emotions still arise, sometimes intensely, but they no longer dictate your identity or your direction. They inform you without ruling you. Jung understood this as a shift from being possessed by psychic contents to containing them. The empath stops being a mirror for the world's emotional turbulence and becomes a vessel capable of holding tension without collapse. This is the birth of inner authority. At this stage, boundaries no longer feel like defenses erected against danger. They become natural expressions of self-respect. Saying no longer carries the emotional weight of rejection or cruelty because it is no longer driven by fear or resentment, but by clarity. You begin to notice that people respond to you differently, not because you demand respect, but because your presence no longer leaks uncertainty. There is less explanation, less justification, less unconscious negotiation. Authority, in Jungian terms, arises when the ego aligns itself with the self, the regulating center of the psyche that transcends personal emotion and reactive identity. This alignment creates a stabilizing effect, not only internally, but relationally. Others may feel calmer around you or strangely unsettled because your presence no longer adapts to their emotional demands. You are no longer absorbed into the psychic field of others. You remain rooted in your own. This is why inner authority often feels lonely. The empath who reaches this stage is no longer rewarded with approval for emotional availability, nor punished with guilt for self-possession. They exist in a new psychological position, neither submissive nor confrontational, neither distant nor engulfed. And it is here that power becomes stewardship, not control over others, but responsibility for one's inner order. From this place, influence becomes effortless because it is no longer compensatory. It is grounded, it is quiet, and it is real. When inner authority stabilizes, its most surprising expression is not speech, assertion, or visibility, but silence. Not the silence of withdrawal or avoidance, but the silence that emerges when there is no longer an inner need to explain, convince, or justify one's existence to the world. Jung observed that psychological power reaches its most mature form when it no longer seeks expression through force. Instead, it radiates through coherence. Coherence is the state in which inner contradictions are no longer fighting for dominance. Thought aligns with feeling. Feeling aligns with action. Action aligns with intention. And intention is no longer reactive, but grounded in a stable sense of self. For the empath, this stage often feels unfamiliar, even unsettling, because so much of their previous identity was built around emotional responsiveness, verbal reassurance, and constant attunement to others. Silence once felt dangerous. It felt like abandonment. It felt like cruelty. But now, silence becomes a signal of presence rather than absence. You no longer rush to fill emotional space. You no longer rescue conversations, relationships, or situations from discomfort. And paradoxically, this restraint creates influence. People begin to listen more carefully, not because you speak louder, but because when you do speak, your words are no longer contaminated by anxiety. Your pauses carry weight. Your stillness communicates boundaries without confrontation. Your calm unsettles chaos. Jung described this phenomenon indirectly when he wrote that the psyche organizes itself around the strongest center available. When your inner world is coherent, it becomes such a center. Others unconsciously orient toward it. This is why the integrated empath often finds that people project authority onto them without invitation. They may be sought out for guidance. They may provoke resistance. They may trigger unease in those who rely on emotional chaos to feel in control. But none of this is chosen. It happens because coherence is rare. Silence becomes influential because it reflects inner order, and inner order exposes disorder without accusation. This is also why this stage demands restraint. The temptation arises to use this influence to correct, instruct, or subtly dominate. But authority collapses the moment it becomes performative. True influence remains indirect. It allows others to encounter themselves. The empath who has reached this stage does not impose structure, they embody it. And in doing so, they become a reference point, not through charisma, but through alignment. This is the quiet power Jung warned must be carried with humility, because it does not belong to the ego, it belongs to the self.
At the end of this inner transformation, something unexpectedly simple becomes clear. Authority was never something the empath needed to claim. It was something that had been waiting to be accepted. For most of life, sensitivity was treated as a liability, while power was associated with force, domination, or emotional harm. And so the empath learned to step aside, to soften themselves, to mistake self-erasure for virtue. But Jung understood that what is rejected within does not disappear. It waits. And when authority is finally integrated, the empath does not become less humane, they become whole. This form of authority does not push, persuade, or overpower. It remains steady. Conflict no longer pulls you into reaction. Emotions no longer fragment your identity. You stand present without absorption, firm without aggression, open without depletion. This is authority without force. Jung called this integration the conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites, where empathy and strength no longer compete but cooperate. And here lies the final paradox. When authority is integrated, it stops demanding recognition. It becomes invisible, yet unmistakable. People may not know why your words carry weight or why your presence changes the emotional climate of a room, but the psyche recognizes coherence, and coherence influences without effort. So before this video ends, consider this, not as a question to answer immediately, but as one to carry with you. Where in your life are you still confusing sensitivity with submission? And what would change if instead of withdrawing your power, you allowed it to stand quietly beside your compassion? If this reflection resonates, stay with this channel. These explorations are not about becoming more impressive, but more integrated. And integration, as Jung reminded us, is the work of a lifetime.